The streets of the city always seemed too loud for Maya. The constant honking of cars, the impatient shuffle of shoes on pavement, and the glittering shop windows full of things she could never afford were a daily reminder of where she didn't belong. She walked with her head slightly bowed, clutching the strap of her old canvas bag as if it could shield her from the world's judgmental eyes. The dress she wore was plain and washed so many times that its color had faded into a dull gray. Yet, she had ironed it carefully that morning, because today was different. Today she would give herself something special. It wasn't her birthday. It wasn't any occasion at all. It was simply the result of months of saving every spare coin from her job at the bookstore, skipping bus rides to walk instead, and sacrificing small comforts like tea or snacks after work. She had gathered just enough to step into a place she had always admired from afar, a restaurant in the city's heart, with sparkling glass doors and golden lights that seemed to belong to another world. Maya had walked past it countless times, gazing at the people who went in, women with flowing dresses, men in sleek suits, couples holding hands and laughing as though life had never hurt them. She had wondered what it would feel like to sit among them, to taste food that wasn't trapped in greasy paper or cooked in oil that had been reused too many times. So here she was, standing in front of the restaurant, her palms damp with nervous sweat. The guard at the entrance glanced at her, and for a moment, she feared he would stop her. But she straightened her back and tried to look confident, hoping he wouldn't see through her fragile disguise. To her relief, he opened the door with a polite nod, though his eyes flickered with slight curiosity. The moment Maya stepped inside, the world changed. The air was cooler, scented with lavender and roasted herbs. The lights glowed warmly from chandeliers above, reflecting on polished tables set with crystal glasses and silver cutlery. Soft piano music floated through the room, wrapping everything in elegance. She hesitated at the threshold, overwhelmed, her senses drowning in the sophistication around her. A hostess approached, her black dress immaculate, her smile professional but distant. "Good evening, miss. Do you have a reservation?" Maya's throat tightened. Reservation? She hadn't thought about that. Panic fluttered in her chest, but she managed a small shake of her head. The hostess's smile faltered slightly, but before she could respond, Maya blurted, "Yeah, broken bar. I just need a small table for one." The hostess's eyes traveled over her dress, her bag, and the faint weariness etched on her face. For a second, Maya thought she would be turned away, but the restaurant wasn't entirely full yet, and the hostess nodded curtly. "Of course, this way, please." Relief surged through Maya as she followed, her steps small and careful. But as they walked, her gaze drifted nervously, drawn to the clusters of diners. Businessmen with sharp expressions leaned over documents even as they ate. Elegant women laughed softly, sipping wine that sparkled like jewels. And at the far end of the room, near the grand windows overlooking the city lights, was a long table empty, except for a single elegant place setting. The hostess stopped near it, then paused, distracted by a colleague who gestured for her attention. She excused herself briefly and walked away, leaving Maya standing there, unsure of where to go. Her heart pounded. Should she wait? Should she sit? She hated standing in the middle of the room, feeling eyes on her. People were starting to notice her hesitation. She bit her lip, glanced at the empty chair at the grand table, and made a choice. "I'll just sit until she comes back," she told herself softly, almost as if she needed permission. So she slipped into the chair, lowering herself carefully, trying to appear as though she belonged. The seat was softer than anything she'd ever sat on. The table gleamed, and in the center sat the single candle flickering gently, its light catching the rim of the glass before her. For the first time in a long time, Maya felt something like pride. She was here. She was part of this world, even if just for an evening. But her moment of fragile triumph shattered when the whispers began. "Isn't that the CEO's table?" someone murmured. "She's sitting at Mr. Knight's spot." Maya froze. Her stomach dropped as though the floor had been pulled from beneath her. "CEO?" She whipped her gaze to the doorway, and there he was, Ethan Knight. Even Maya, who rarely followed the news, recognized him. He was the man whose face appeared on magazines displayed in the bookstore where she worked. A man rumored to have built an empire from nothing, yet feared in boardrooms for his ruthless decisions. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair perfectly styled and a jawline as sharp as the suits he wore, he was the kind of man who commanded silence without speaking. And now he was walking toward her. Maya's hands trembled in her lap. She had sat at the wrong table, the one table that belonged to him. Panic surged like fire in her veins. She had to leave. She had to apologize before she was thrown out. She pushed her chair back, rising halfway, her words stumbling out. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I thought I'll leave right now. Her voice cracked with desperation. Her cheeks burned with humiliation, hot tears threatening to spill. She was certain he would call the manager, demand she be removed, maybe even humiliate her further in front of everyone. But Ethan Knight didn't call anyone. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't even frown. He stopped in front of her, his gaze sweeping over her with an intensity that made her knees weak. His eyes, stormy gray, sharp yet unreadably, lingered on her trembling fingers gripping the strap of her bag, on the way her lips quivered as she tried to explain herself, on the fragile courage in her posture despite her fear. Then, slowly, he raised a hand. Stay. The single word cut through the whispers, through the buzzing of the room, through the chaos in Maya's mind. It was not loud, yet it carried an authority that silenced everything around them. Maya blinked, stunned. Had she heard correctly? "Yeah, broken bar would," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Ethan's lips curved ever so slightly, not quite a smile, but something close. "I said stay." "Sit down." Her legs wobbled beneath her. She didn't understand. Why wasn't he angry? Why wasn't he ordering her out? Instead, he looked at her as though she was a broken bar, interesting, different, not someone to be dismissed so easily. The room seemed to hold its breath. Diners exchanged glances, their whispers now sharper with curiosity. Nobody ever questioned Ethan Knight. If he said stay, then she would stay. Maya sank slowly back into the chair, her pulse thundering in her ears. She didn't know why he had spared her humiliation, why his gaze hadn't turned cold with disdain. All she knew was that she was sitting across from a man who could change lives with a word, and tonight, he had chosen to speak one word to her. Stay. And as she tried to calm the storm in her chest, Maya had no idea that this single mistake, this accidental choice of sitting at the wrong table, was about to alter the course of her life forever. Maya sat frozen, her fingers curling tightly around the hem of her faded dress, afraid to even breathe too loudly. Around them, the air had shifted, the whispers had grown hushed, like ripples after a stone had been dropped into water. Every eye in the room seemed to burn into her back, not with kindness, but with curiosity and disbelief. Why would Ethan Knight, the man who never tolerated mistakes, the man whose very presence turned boardrooms into graveyards of silence, tell her to stay? Maya dared to glance at him again. He had taken the seat opposite her, unhurried, as though this had been his plan all along. A waiter appeared almost immediately, bowing slightly. "Mr. Knight, shall I prepare the table for your meeting?" Ethan didn't take his eyes off Maya. His voice was low, commanding. "Not tonight." The waiter blinked, surprised. Before nodding quickly, he vanished, leaving the room buzzing with fresh speculation. Important guests had been waiting for Ethana, business partners, investors, people with power and wealth, and he had dismissed them all with a single decision. For a poor girl who had stumbled into the wrong place, it felt like being struck by lightning. Maya's pulse raced. She needed to leave. She needed to thank him and run before this turned into something unbearable. She opened her mouth, fumbling for words. "Mr. Knight, yeah, I shouldn't be here. I sat down only because the hostess she left me, and I thought up." Ethan leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on the table. His gaze pinned her in place. "I know exactly what you thought. You didn't belong here. But you were tired of standing. You were hoping no one would notice." Her breath caught. He had read her so easily it was terrifying. She dropped her gaze, shame burning her cheeks. "I didn't mean to cause trouble. I'll move to another table." "Number." The firmness in his tone silenced her. "Do you think I let people sit at my table by accident?" His voice wasn't harsh, but there was steel beneath it. Maya shook her head quickly. "Yeah, broken bar, I don't know." He studied her for a long moment. The weight of his gaze felt heavier than the walls around them. It was as though he could see straight through the faded fabric of her dress, past her trembling hands, right into the quiet corners of her heart where her insecurities hid. "What's your name?" he asked finally. Maya swallowed. Maya, he repeated, rolling the syllables slowly, as if testing them on his tongue. "And what brings you here tonight?" The question made her throat tighten. How could she tell him the truth, that she had saved for months to buy herself one meal in this palace of glittering chandeliers, that she had wanted, for just one night, to feel like she wasn't the invisible poor girl who shelved books all day for minimum wage? She could lie, but the sharpness of his gaze warned her against it, so she whispered, "I just a broken bar, wanted to try something different." For the first time, his expression softened. It wasn't a smiley Ethan Knight was not a man who smiled easily, but there was a faint glimmer of something less intimidating in his eyes. "You're honest," he said simply. The words startled her more than if he had insulted her. Honest? She had never thought of it that way. She had only told the truth because she wasn't brave enough to lie under that piercing stare. Ethan leaned back, signaling the waiter again. "Bring her a menu." Maya's heart nearly stopped. "Oh no. Yeah, I can't." "You can." His tone left no room for protest. The waiter returned with a leather-bound menu and placed it in front of her. Maya touched it with trembling fingers, the gold lettering glinting beneath the light. She opened it, and her stomach twisted. The prices swam before her eyes, each dish costing more than she made in a week. Her hands shook as she closed the menu. "Yeah, broken bar, I can't order this." Ethan arched an eyebrow. "Why not?" "It's too much," she whispered, ashamed. He tilted his head slightly, observing her as though she were a puzzle he intended to solve. "You think I asked you to stay so you could worry about the price?" "I don't want charity," she blurted before she could stop herself. The words tumbled out raw, filled with years of buried pride. The air between them shifted again. For a moment, Ethan said nothing. His gray eyes darkened, not with anger, but with intrigue. Few people dared to speak so boldly to him. Finally, he said, "Then don't think of it as charity. Think of it as a broken bar curiosity." Maya frowned, confused. "I spend every night at this table," Ethan continued, his voice steady, calm, but with an undertone she couldn't quite name. "Surrounded by people who want something from me. Money, power, deals. They smile with their mouths and lie with their eyes. Do you know how exhausting that is?" She shook her head. "But tonight," he said slowly, "someone sat at my table who wanted nothing from me. Someone who just wanted a meal." "That makes you a broken bar interesting." The sincerity, or perhaps the blunt honesty of his words made her chest tighten. No one had ever called her interesting. She was ordinary, invisible, a shadow that passed through the world unnoticed. The waiter reappeared, and Ethan gestured without looking at the menu. "Bring her whatever she wants, and bring me the same." Maya's lips parted in shock. "Bota." "No arguments," he interrupted firmly. "Delete, and I'll eat with you." The waiter bowed and left, leaving Maya drowning in disbelief. This couldn't be real. She was nobody. He was Ethan Knight, and yet, he had dismissed his important guests to share a meal with her. Around them, the whispers had grown louder. People craned their necks, the curiosity burning holes in her skin. She wanted to disappear, but Ethan's calm presence anchored her to the chair. She fiddled with the edge of the napkin, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why are you doing this?" Ethan met her gaze steadily. "Because you remind me of something I almost forgot existed." Her brow furrowed. "What's that?" "Truth," he said simply. The word hung between them, heavy and unexpected. Maya didn't know what to say. She had spent her whole life trying to survive, never realizing that her honesty, her simplicity, could mean anything to someone like him. The food arrived, beautifully plated, fragrant and steaming. Maya hesitated, staring at it as though it were forbidden. Ethan picked up his fork, cutting into his meal with practiced ease. "Go on," he said. Her hands trembled as she lifted her fork, tasting the food. The flavors burst across her tongue, richer than anything she had ever known. For a moment, her eyes fluttered shut, overwhelmed. When she opened them again, Ethan was watching her, and not with judgment, but with something softer, something almost human beneath the steel of his reputation. For the first time that night, Maya allowed herself to breathe. They ate in silence at first, but slowly, he began asking questions not about her work, her income, or her struggles, but about her dreams. What did she enjoy? What books did she read? What did she wish for, if money were not a concern? At first, Maya hesitated, giving small, cautious answers. But the longer he listened to really listen, the more her voice grew steadier. She told him about her love for stories, how she lost herself in novels during quiet hours at the bookstore. She admitted her secret dream of writing one someday, though she quickly dismissed it with a nervous laugh. Ethan didn't laugh. He looked at her as though every word mattered. By the time the plates were cleared, Maya's fear had lessened, replaced by a strange, fragile warmth. She still didn't understand why he had chosen her, why he had told her to stay. But as she sat across from the most powerful man in the room, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Seen, and though she couldn't yet grasp the meaning of it, Maya knew that this night, the night she accidentally sat at the wrong table, would mark the beginning of something she could never have imagined.